Well, this is Jerry Mikulski with Neal Gorenflo of Shareable, which I have admired from afar since the day you launched it, because every time I think of some issue that might be interesting in the relationship economy, you've already written about it somehow. I don't know how you do it.
Well, I have a great team, and it's not me, so that's
Well,
uh,
you appear to be
that's how it
sourcing all these
works.
things magically, so uh, it's pretty fantastic.
Thanks, Jerry. Yeah, and actually, we have crossed many times, including through Shareable. And I was just on the way walking back here from lunch, thinking about the time you facilitated our Share San Francisco meeting, which got a lot of things rolling, actually. And that was
That
back in 2011.
I know. Doesn't 2011 feel like 1995 somehow?
Yeah, yeah, it's that's eons. We're in a kind of new era,
Yeah, yeah.
like something in the last year we've crossed over into a new like space time.
We're now in this new exciting land of open everything and closed everything, of post-truth and the Trumpocalypse, and yet all sorts of cool things happening around the world. And you have a book basically that's coming out right now about how cities are doing stuff. What sparked this to come together?
Yes, so I'll just give you like the nut graph on what it is, and then we can go into how it happened. So sharing cities, activating the urban commons. It's the title. It's a collection of solutions. Okay, it has case studies. It has model policies that we have collected from all over the world with our team, and curated. Things that are local, things that are commons based, things that are replicable, that people can take a look at it, and from what they read can get a start at least, and have links to go deeper if they want. So there's over 130 that we've selected out of literally thousands that we looked at, and it's 275 pages that says, yes, we are. Not yes, not let's make something great again. Not yes, we can, like we might be able to do it. What this book says, what Sharing City says, is we're doing it. We are the answer, and we're doing it. And if we could kind of like take our heads out of our proverbial butts for a second, take our heads out of like Facebook land and all kinds of meme wars and manufactured polarization, we would see that there is a rising movement of people who focus their energy on their common needs and how they can be met together. And when we do that, we not only transform our communities, we transform each other. This is really what gets us excited.
Love that. It's very funny. My Mika Sifri just sent me a link to a post he just wrote called "I Wish I Could Quit You, Facebook." Of course, the cover picture is an image from Brokeback Mountain, and he's right. It's really, you're right. It's really hard to pull away from all those things, and in a small measure, things like Facebook are helping us discover all the kinds of projects that you're tabulating here and describing in different ways, and maybe even coordinate events where we get together and plant a new garden or raise chickens or teach other people how to keep bees or whatnot. Is there one thing that
True, and I would just add.
Yeah, go ahead.
True, I would just add to that though that being a nonprofit that's about solutions that are people-centered, community-centered solutions, and a media nonprofit. So we've been publishing almost daily since 2009 about how people come together to solve their problems, and share and collaborate. So we're part of this evolution of the media, very small, but a witness to what's happening. And what seems very evident to us is that the good news stories get pushed to the side, the solution stories get pushed to the side. Whatever is the most provocative and even psychologically traumatizing algorithmically gets presented to us.
And so what you and I have discovered over the last decade or two is that insanely cool things are happening all the time, and that cities seem to be where the action is. That It's weird. Our federal government
Yeah.
seems to be pretty darn dysfunctional, especially right now. Intergovernmental agencies don't seem to be helping very much.
Yeah.
States are a mess. State legislatures and governorships don't seem to help very much. Everybody's kind of kicked the can down to cities, except everybody took their budget along the way. So it's not like cities have a lot of money to do anything with, and yet they're doing all this really creative stuff along the way.
Yeah, I mean, the relevance to sharing cities is that it points to how cities and how communities are tapping the asset, the resource that they have left, which is people power, right? If the capital is left or is scarce, then we have each other. And there's this, quote from the book, a common scholar, Keith Taylor. He says, when the market and the government fails, we have each other, right? So we are the sort of ace up our own sleeves, and to put a sharper point on what you're saying is, you could say that our federal government, there's already been a kind of like slow motion, legal and administrative and regulatory sort of coup d'etat. It's done, right? And okay, it's worthy of trying to be rescued. At the same time, we may not be able to wait for that sort of reversal of a coup. We may need to take action that is more immediate and direct, right where we live. And I think people are also waking up to the fact that, like, participating in or being a leader in a way of organizing people that's arm's length and that's algorithmically driven, that's about big data. We're going to have to back up from that a little bit and start meeting each other face to face in our neighborhoods and solving problems together and really rebuild a kind of a civic culture, something that the United States used to be famous for.
Exactly. It's funny. One of my conclusions from following the word consumer around for 20 years is that we consumerized everything, and in so doing, we tore apart, we shredded the fabric of society. And there's a reason we use the metaphor of fabric, in that all those little filaments that are the interdependencies that connect us to each other, like knowing that Mrs. Foster down the block doesn't get out very often and probably needs her newspaper and groceries brought to her. The stuff that used to be the little connections that meant you knew who was trustworthy and who needed help in the community, those are mostly gone. And we with good intentions, we institutionalized them, and then we just removed them as a kind of responsibility for being alive. Your responsibility as a good consumer is to keep buying stuff, and if you don't do that, the economy will come to a halt and everything will be terrible and our lives will be grim and disgusting, right? And we're discovering that maybe that's not true, partly because, hey, the money got cut away. And that reminds me of a quote also, a different quote. This one's by Jaime Lerner, who was the mayor of Curitiba back in the 70s. And he came in and he said, after all the stuff they did, reinventing Curitiba, major changes, afterward he said, if you want innovation, take a zero off the budget. If you want transformation, take 2 zeros off the budget. Because they were forced to do things with no money at all, and the kinds of solutions they came up with were insanely creative. And so this isn't really a matter of budgets and money much of the time. Often it's about creativity and community and connectedness and coming up with things. Can you sort of talk about some of the initiatives you wrote about in the book with your co-writers, and kind of what are the ones that stand out for you?
Yeah, so I had this fabulous opportunity. I went to Buenos Aires and Argentina for a conference on sharing and collaboration on alternative economy, and part of the event was held at this cultural center called CC. And the start of it was almost 10 years ago, after a tragic one. Almost 200 people died, and then the city just clamped down on all of these clubs. Some of them operating on margin, below the radar, maybe not adhering to regulations, but the city went, just full force and sort of just throttle the cultural scene. And so CCM, they innovated a business model that worked, that was safe, that was cooperative, so cooperatively owned by the workers, and for the point and purpose of really fostering the creative life of the community, like developing artists, right? And it worked when it was based on beer sales and food and music, right? And that was those were the drivers financially, and that helped them also. That kind of revenue stream subsidized things like poetry and literature and painting and things like that. So they were looking at a spectrum of culture and helping that flourish. And they taught other cultural centers how they operated. They were instrumental in helping it go from 100 or so like them to 800 in the span of around 7 years or something like that. And now all 800 of these, they collaborate, right? So they buy supplies together. Right? They do multi-location festivals, and they are a political force. They lobby city government for cultural-friendly policies. And so now they've created, it's not just an enterprise, but an ecosystem with a purpose of creating a vibrant cultural scene for mostly youth. It's a younger scene, but also to develop artists. You know, like step by step, they can go to these little venues, experience, have showings and shows, and build an audience and start to build a life and a art career for themselves. So I mean, that is the kind of thing that we really like and highlight in the book. That's just one example, and one that I went and saw, and it was really mind blowing.
Love that. I grew up 2 years of my life when I was a kid in Buenos Aires, so love it, and hadn't heard about the cultural centers, so I'll go look this up. It's fabulous.
Yeah, CCM, and it's in the book. Yeah.
What other? Can you name one other that?
Yeah, so we cover. There's also participatory budgeting, which started in Brazil like in the 80s, and so we have the case study from Porto Alegre, but it's there's I think over 1,500 cities now that do participatory budgeting. It's just getting started here in the United States. There's the participatory budgeting project, and they're spreading this in city governments, but also in places like schools and also in organizations. And the organization itself also uses a participatory budgeting process to allocate resources within the nonprofit. So that's a really interesting thing. There's some really great policies, like in San Francisco, we've got all kinds of things that help support car sharing, like on-street and off-street parking set aside for car sharing users. You've got also new building codes that there's allowances, so you don't have to, if you have car sharing in the building, you don't have to have as many parking spaces per unit. There's in London, and also I think in Australia, there's ghost taxes. So they're taxes to if vacant property, the tax is like double or something, very significantly higher. So it incentivizes property owners to put residents in in their residential real estate. And this is really important, because in a lot of neighborhoods and cities, the vacancy rate is like 20-30%, and there's a kind of a so-called house or very high housing costs. So there's let's see, in Hamburg, Germany, the citizens campaign to buy back the electricity grid, and so they're really driving towards renewable energy and also democratic governance of their local power utility, their electric utility. So there's, these are just, I'm scratching the surface.
That is great.
Some good examples. Yeah, I mean, I think the point overall, though, is that you could run the city as a commons, that there is almost nothing, or at least a majority of the way a city runs, it could be run by people in a democratic fashion, but on a commons basis.
Mm-hmm. Is there one thing that jumped out that you would recommend to every city to just go do? Like, close your eyes and just go do this thing?
Yeah, participatory budgeting is definitely one of those things. That's like a complete no-brainer, and because first it drives towards equity, it builds social capital, and you also get better outcomes. The money gets spent better. It's more relevant, the spending to citizens, because they decide how, what the projects are going to be in the neighborhood. So there's a real kind of granularity that a city can, and how a city develops, that you can get with participatory budgeting, because neighbors are coming together to, on very specific things, like we need a stop sign here, or a traffic light here, or we want to put some benches in the park. That's one. A similar thing is this idea of collaborative city councils. And so there are certain cities like Frome in the UK and Bologna in Italy, where the city councils both operates very traditionally, but it's also a platform that citizens can engage and form like collaboration pacts with the city, and create a service, a product, or some value-added thing for the community, and get support from both like sort of logistics and technical support, but also a little bit of money to do it. And Frome, actually, they had two organizers that helped coordinate the network of projects that were forming around the city council, to find the collaborations and the synergies, but also to help them with their crowdfunding. So the city would match or help publicize these crowdfunding campaigns. So I think this idea of a collaborative city council is a really good one to go after. And then also just civic crowdfunding, like open up some of the projects that they're not just being paid by taxes and administered by the government, but they're also contributions coming directly from the community, as well as ideas and knowledge and labor that can be contributed to the projects as well. So those are three that really kind of top of mind.
Those are cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
So my quest for the last long period has been about trust. Or at least I've discovered recently that my quest has been about trust, because I've been explaining it as the relationship economy, and mostly what that causes is like, what do you mean relationship economy? So then I have to tell stories. But when I say, hey, I'm investigating trust, they're like, oh, yeah, trust. I know what that is. And then it turns out that most people haven't spent a lot of time thinking about trust. And I think that a lot of the initiatives that you're talking about and writing about in the book have trust as a central feature. They're about us trusting one another again as citizens. They're about cities trusting those citizens to come together and offer good advice, not to become the feared mob, etc. Can you riff a little bit on trust, just from the perspective of what you've just done in the scene?
Yeah. Well, I think the projects do rely on trust, but also they build trust. Yeah. And I think this is the overlooked part, is that it's not only important what is provisioned to a community, but also how it's provisioned, how the citizens are directly involved, and how they collaborate, because that's how trust is built. And also a kind of larger, you could call it social capital, could call it a civic culture. We build our civic muscles. We build our ability to and our faith in projects. And once, the sort of observation of reporting on this and publishing about it since 2009 is that small innovations can lead to progressively bigger innovations that can lead then to a new and very positive trajectory for the entire community, a kind of upward spiral. And this is what often is left out of the discussion and not thought, because it's very long term. But it's the highest return on any kind of project that any city or community can do. Because once you reach that threshold and you created a civic culture, it can literally last for centuries. Mm-hmm. And let's go back to Bologna, right? So Bologna, has this almost 1,000-year-old civic tradition, starting with the first university in the Western world, I think in the 11th century, which was essentially a co-op. Students coming together and saying, let's pool our money and buy the teachers and rent the teachers, or hire the teachers we need to teach us, or we want to teach us. That's how the university started, right? So you've got that
in 1088.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that's right. 11th century. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
And then in the Middle Ages, it was an Italian city state. It was self-rule. Then and this in the last century, now this century, 30% of the economy is cooperative, and it's not just that there were 30% are co-ops. It's that these co-ops are connected and cooperating themselves, and have a set of institutions that create a very vibrant and resilient ecosystems for the success of small to medium-sized co-ops that can compete in the global economy because they share on things that help them reduce their costs and market into the global economy.
That's fabulous.
And and it stabilizes the whole economy because co-ops pay more, that they last longer, they're more resilient in recessions. So we have to pay attention to that because it's a way to stabilize the middle class and also lift people out of poverty.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because in the U.S. we tend to be pretty nationalistic and a bit xenophobic, which means we prize things that are American and inventions that are American and cultures and traditions and institutions that are American, and we fear or ignore basically everything else in the rest of the world. And what this book brings to light is like, damn, people, there's really great innovations happening all around the world. Look around, pick them up, and implement them, right?
Exactly.
Just go do.
It's as simple. It's as simple as that. But I have real hope for here in the U.S. and other places because there is this kind of civic revival where people are starting to put aside their ideological differences, or at least voting out politicians who put that center first, right? And becoming more pragmatic, becoming more now focused, becoming more appreciative of the assets they have and how they can build on them, more appreciative of common needs and how they can be pursued together, of solutions. And Froome is a perfect example. Bologna is an example. There are other cities. Cleveland, you've got the a really great co-op project going there with their anchor institutions that
Evergreen Co-op?
Feed business. The Evergreen Co-ops, thank you. Yeah, that's in the book too.
Yep.
I think this focus is going to start to become more, as we see people tire and get exhausted of this treadmill of trauma and provocation. They're just going to go, I need to make rent and feed my family. I've got to get my kids educated. We need some solutions. Let's just talk about that.
I keep thinking people are going to get tired of the treadmill and tired of the whole consumer thing. Ooh, shiny object, must have shiny object.
Yeah.
And they don't. They keep beating their heads against this thing, and they keep going along with the today's conventions and methods. So from your lips to God's ears, as they say. Let's just get tired of the usual way of doing things and go for these. Actually, these are not flashy, new-fangled inventions. These are actually long-standing traditions that we're now kind of rediscovering that make a ton of sense and that bring back that fabric of community.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I honestly think that things have to get a little bit worse before they get better. Just people's, the old system has to break down. Are on an individual basis, obligations to institutions, that they have to be broken. The bonds have to be broken, and before you can establish new ones, there has. And still, people are kind of locked into the old system to a large extent, and I think that it's possible things might have to get worse before they get better, and we should be and not. There is this sort of attitude of people don't do something unless it's like an emergency. And I think we have to be compassionate, and say that is when they're able to, actually, that their hands might be tied before that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's like the city of Curitiba is in an emergency. The city of Medellin is in an emergency when they catalyze all these kinds of changes. And And some answers are basically to double down and just appoint somebody dictator and impose military rule and curfew. And other answers are to rediscover what it means to be a citizen in community. Um, If, I hope somebody listening to this, scrolls back 10 minutes to what you were saying a moment ago about the fact that this builds trust and social capital. This isn't just about where you start. So this isn't about looking around and going, well, damn, we have no trust in our community or in our country or whatever, and therefore we can't do any of these things, because you're completely right. These things all exercise those muscles and then create those little bonds that let us ladder up and kind of ratchet up to progressively higher trust and earn our way into one another's lives in a way that's really hard to do when we're just distant and disconnected, and the only the way to satisfy your impulses is to have it show up now in a box from Amazon.
Yeah, exactly. And just to go a little deeper on this is two things. First, it's through these kinds of processes working together that people become human, that they develop as individuals. Desmond Tutu has the saying, people are people through other people, right? So we actually create each other if there is space for this interaction. If in our regulatory system and our laws and our culture, we value democracy on an everyday basis, not just in the political sphere, but in the economies of our community and our home, right? And this is how we develop and become fully realized human beings. This is what we should be thinking about, right? About this kind of human scale development. And then, this is also what is the most important driver for happiness is the quality of our relationships, the quality and character of the relationships. Are we back in consumer culture where we're judging each other by our zip codes, what car we drive, what we're wearing and the job we have and the income that's with it? Or are we, approaching each other as potential collaborators? Oh, I wonder what Jerry's up to. And, oh, isn't it so cool what he's doing? I want to help out. I can actually help out. I can do this. And you're looking at my project. You're saying, oh, I can help you. And it's more about, instead of judgment, it's about what we can do together.
Love that. Totally.
And I think that's the kind of thing that breeds a lot of happiness and satisfaction.
I think so, too. I think.
And also, importantly,
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, also importantly, it's not just about happiness. I think happiness is kind of like, it ensues. It may not be something to pursue directly. Yeah, it's like a byproduct. If you get it, great, but if you pursue purpose and meaning, these are deeply satisfying and I don't know, the very grit of life.
Mm-hmm. Love that. So the book is purchasable now, but comes out mid-December, I think.
Yeah. So we've you can go on shareable.net/contribute, and we're doing a crowdfunder, so you can pre-order a print copy, an ebook, for Kindle. There's also an option you can get a free PDF. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to accommodate everyone and their budget and their needs, and it's a way to get the book and pick something out in your community, but also to support us in our reporting. So you can really go deeper on some of this stuff. Even though this is 275 pages, we have just scratched the surface. Mm-hmm. Exactly. There's so much more.
Well, if you go look at Michelle Bowen's Peer-to-Peer Foundation Wiki, which is another resource like Shareable that I look at often, because all these things are in there, woven intensively into this fabric of how to fix the problems of the world. So, yeah. So thanks for helping increase our capital for ideas and connectivity on how all this stuff works. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And remember, this journey in 2011 at Share San Francisco Impact Hub, and you helped us do this event. It led to this idea to do a policy guide. We did that policy guide, and then we followed up with the book. And the book was actually our community, it was their top sort of like demand and ask of us as an organization. They were like, what do you mean by shared cities? We need a guide. We need a vision. And that's what it's an answer to that call.
That's great. I love that. Thank you much.
Yeah, thank you much. Back.